The final topic that we need to cover in Chapter 4 is shadows and highlights. So it's more versatile than its name suggests, and especially when we're smart enough to use non-destructive and some masking even. So our shadows and highlights is the next thing that we're going to learn. We use it to brighten up shadows that are too dark and to darken up or bring detail back into highlights. The photo that we're going to use is Dave and Callie again. So if you want to click to open that file, again, it's the original background image. And remember, I've told you that if we work through the image option up here and we choose adjustments, we do see shadows and highlights here. However, everything that we do through this menu is going to be destructive, and we don't want that. So we're going to come over again and look at our adjustment layer button, and we see, oh, there's levels and curves, but where's shadow and highlights? It isn't here. Okay, that's a serious bummer because we do want to do this non-destructively. So there's something of a workaround, and it's called making your actual image, your background layer, a smart object. And a smart object is a special layer in Photoshop that has the unique ability to remember its origin. Whatever we do to it, we can always revert back to the original state of it, which makes it non-destructive. So it's very simple to create a smart object, whatever layer it is that you want to work with. We're going to click on it, and then we can use the flyout menu as one way and convert to a smart object. We could also have right-clicked to see those same options. So right away, a couple of differences. This is no longer named background. It's called layer 0, and there's this icon in the corner of it. What that means is that it remembers the original picture, and every time this file gets opened up or sent to another person, that original file goes with it in case people need to revert to it. This will also make your file larger. So unless there's a specific reason to do this, don't make layers smart objects because it basically doubles up on your file size. If there's a valid reason to do it, like right now, we want to use a filter, well, not a filter, we want to use shadows and highlights in a non-destructive way. So that's a valid reason for making it a smart object. All right, now the only way to get to that is truly to go up here. So image, adjustments, shadows and highlights. So here is our default window for shadows and highlights. I'm just going to move it out of the way. The default is it always opens the shadows by 35%, so anything that was dark is now brighter. And the highlight areas, it doesn't do anything to at the beginning. With our preview checked, we at least get to see. So here was our original image. Here's the preview showing 35%. Go to the Show More Options button, and we're going to see a lot more options. All right, so it's broken down into shadows, highlights, and adjustments. So the amount slider refers to the strength of the brightening or darkening, whatever you're doing. So when we're working with the shadows, how much are we brightening them? When we're working with the highlights, how much are we darkening them? The tone is the tonal width, and that helps Photoshop understand what you consider to be a highlight or a shadow. So 50% tonal width right in the dead center point tells Photoshop that half of the luminosity values are considered shadows and half are considered highlights. The radius is how many pixels, and this is hard to figure out at first, or by observing the results actually. But Photoshop is using a radius of pixels that's going to calculate what is a highlight, what is a shadow. So in general, leaving this default value where it is a very, very safe setting. Down here in the adjustments, so these are the same amount, tone, and radius behave the same for these two topics. Down further in this panel, we have color correction. This is going to change the saturation of the colors. And mid-tone contrast is going to boost contrast in the midtones. So we're going to look at our shadows, and right now they're open 35%. Let's bump that to 61 and give it a second to catch up. What we're really trying to do is remember we're trying to improve the areas that are bad, which basically is our person and the dog. So this is maybe too extreme, maybe not. In the book, they're talking about taking it all the way up to 90%. They really want to see detail in the shadows. The tonal width, they're bumping up a little bit also. It's starting to look bad in my opinion. The highlights, where do we want to recover some detail? So if we start pulling this to the right and let go, we're going to see our highlight areas, the parts that were bright, come back with some detail in them. So we're starting to see some detail in here. In the book, he talks about going to 30%. And the mid-tone contrast, he talks about using a plus 40. We are starting to dangerously make this look like HDR photography, which is a bit much. So I'm going to reset this. So by holding the Option key, I'm going to click on Reset. I think that's all too much. However, I think we could open the shadows a little bit more. And I think we could get some detail back in the highlights. So I'm looking at the ground right over here. At 0, it's very bright. At even just 11 or whatever percent, we start to get some detail back in here. So if we're happy with that, we can say OK, and then we need to look over at our layers panel and see how this behaved. Because we made this a smart layer, what we just did is considered a smart filter. And the beauty of this is that it's non-destructive. We can turn it on or off. And if there are a bunch of them, they would continue lining up underneath here. For now, we only have shadows and highlights. So turning off the eyeball for shadows and highlights is the same thing as turning off the smart filters in their entirety. But we also have a mask here. So if we wanted to tweak where this adjustment took place, we can use the mask. We can click to highlight the mask, and we can go back to what we learned a while ago. We can paint with black and white. I'm just going to sample a dark black color. And with our brush, again, we can paint in here. This is a small brush. It's not going to do a great job. But when I stop painting, I can see my layer mask indeed is blocking this filter, the shadow and highlight filter over here in the foliage. I didn't want it to affect there. I just wanted it to affect other areas of the image. So anytime you can't find a tool in a non-destructive way, like shadows and highlights, the way to make it non-destructive long-term is to change your background layer into a smart object and then go and apply that change, the shadows and highlights, and it will be applied as a smart filter. If we were to save this file, it's going to save as a PSD, and if I open this file up tomorrow and say, wow, this is pretty bad, I can't believe I did that, I can double click on the filter itself, shadows and highlights. I can come in here and tweak it. I can change my mind, say okay, or if I think, I don't know why I did this, I don't know why I put masking on. If I wanted this to go back to be all white, as long as I have it highlighted, I can switch my foreground color to white. So I can click on these double arrows, and the putsy way would be to color in here with white, and we could get it all back. The faster way would just be to fill with your foreground color, which is not that one. I just did a Command Delete, and you can see that I filled with the background color. But what I meant to do was an Option Delete, and that fills with your foreground color of white. So if you ever muck up your mask and you want to get back to this in a way that you don't have to use undo or something else, select your mask, make sure that white is your foreground color, and then Option Delete or Alt Delete on PC will fill that mask back with white, which means all of this special effect is shining through. Also notice that when you make it into a smart layer, all of your smart filters are loaded below it, whereas everything else we've done, our adjustments have been stacked above. So that gets us through chapter 4, and I will talk about your homework.